As Arthur C. Clarke once mused, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is where we take interesting source material and, well, we dive deep to pull out the key insights for you.
That's the plan.
And today, we're looking at something that really does feel a bit like magic, doesn't it? It's that ancient dream, turning lead into gold.
Yeah, the alchemist's dream.
Exactly. And our source material for this is from an article called Alchemy, Gold, and the Collapse of Scarcity, which was published in the Daily Economy.
Right, and that article makes a fascinating point. It says modern physics, using things like the Large Hadron Collider, has actually managed a version of this. A very, very fleeting one, mind you.
Okay, so that sets up our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack what this Daily Economy piece tells us about the science, what can be done. Then we'll look hard at the really significant limitations right now.
Huge limitations.
And then, this is the really interesting part, I think. We'll follow the article into its thought experiment. What if? What if those limitations vanished? What would the economic, the social, even the geopolitical fallout be?
And this isn't just, sci-fi speculation. The article frames it as a way to understand how technology can disrupt fundamental systems of value. Gold is maybe the ultimate example.
Absolutely. Thinking about these kinds of disruptions is so relevant today. It touches on economics, global affairs.
Yeah.
It's the sort of connected thinking that's really useful, especially if you're preparing for, say, comprehensive exams like the UPSC, where understanding these big systemic shifts is crucial.
Definitely. It stretches your thinking about value itself.
And just to reiterate, everything we're talking about today, it's drawn from that Daily Economy article. So let's jump in. The science versus the dream. What does the article say scientists can actually do now?
Well, the piece confirms that scientists can, in fact, create atoms with 79 protons. That's the atomic number for gold. By smashing lead atoms together really, really hard at speeds incredibly close to the speed of light inside these huge particle accelerators like the LHC.
Wow. Okay, so lead atoms go in, gold atoms come out. Sounds like alchemy achieved.
But here's the catch the article points out immediately. A very big catch.
I figured there'd be one.
Yeah. What they create aren't nice, stable gold atoms ready for a vault. They're unstable isotopes.
Meaning?
Meaning they have the right number of protons, yes, but maybe the wrong number of neutrons. Or they're just packed with way too much energy from that massive collision. They're agitated.
And being unstable means they don't stick around.
Not even close. The article says they exist for less than a millionth of a second.
A millionth of a second.
Poof. They decay or change into something else almost instantly. They don't last long enough to even grab electrons and become a proper neutral atom, let alone form, a gold bar.
Okay, so it's an incredible feat of physics, proving we can manipulate elements at the nuclear level. That's amazing in itself.
It is a real testament to our understanding of physics.
But it's absolutely not the practical alchemy the ancients dreamed of. The article calls it, what was the phrase? A far cry from the practical transformation.
Exactly. It's a brilliant science experiment, not a production line for gold.
Which brings us squarely to the current reality, the immense practical hurdles the article detailed. It says we need a sober look at the costs and logistics. What are the big ones?
Well, first off, the energy involved is just mind-boggling, astronomical.
Right.
Running particle accelerators like the LHC takes colossal amounts of electricity. Plus, you need extreme cooling, complex machinery, rare materials, very specialized buildings. The whole setup is immense.
And the cost. The article gave a number, didn't it?
It did, and it's staggering. It estimates that producing just one single ounce of gold this way could cost tens of millions of dollars.
Tens of millions. Or 1 ounce. When mining costs, what, hundreds, maybe a couple $1,000s an ounce?
Precisely. The economics are just completely upside down. And efficiency, forget it.
How bad is it?
The article mentions you might need literally billions of collisions between lead atoms just to produce a handful of potentially usable gold atoms.
Billions for a few atoms.
Yeah. So making even a tiny amount, like a few milligrams, the article suggests that could take days, maybe weeks of running these massive machines flat out.
And it's not exactly safe, I imagine.
No, definitely not. The article points out serious physical and radiological risks. You're dealing with high-energy particle beams and the radioactive byproducts of all that atom smashing. It requires incredibly strict safety protocols.
So scaling this up seems impossible right now.
Well, the infrastructure needed would be unbelievable, according to the article. Not just one LHC, but maybe networks of synchronized accelerators or reactors that don't even exist. The cost to build and maintain something like that, it would make current mining operations look tiny.
And even if you could make it, there's the purity issue the article raises.
Right. Natural gold is mostly one stable isotope. Gold 197, the stuff made in a lab, it might be a messy mix. It could contain unstable isotopes, maybe even residual radiation.
Which means it wouldn't be suitable for, well, anything we use gold for now. Jewelry, electronics, central bank reserves.
It would need, as the article puts it, expensive purification. And if it can't meet the strict metallurgical standards, it's basically just a scientific novelty, not functional gold.
So the article's bottom line on today's reality is pretty clear then.
Unequivocal. Artificial gold creation is far from commercially viable. It faces massive practical, technical, and economic barriers. Mining is safe for now.
Okay. Science is cool, but practical alchemy is miles away. But let's follow the article's thought experiment. Let's imagine somehow, someday, these barriers fall, technology finds a way. What happens then?
This is where the article looks to history for clues. It uses historical parallels as a kind of mental model.
Acknowledging gold is special, right? Its monetary role is unique.
Absolutely. It admits the analogies aren't perfect, but they show what happens when technology shatters the scarcity of a valuable commodity.
And the first example it uses is whale oil. Seems obscure now, but...
But back in the 18th, 19th centuries, it was vital. The primary fuel for lamps. Huge coastal economies, like in New England, were built on whaling. It was a major commodity. Until kerosene was invented, derived from petroleum, and then huge oil reserves were discovered, like in Pennsylvania in 1859.
The disruptor.
Right.
Cheaper, easier to get, more scalable.
Exactly. And the result, according to the article, demand for whale oil just plummeted. The entire whaling industry collapsed. New economic centers popped up around oil. And artificial light became affordable for almost everyone. A total transformation.
Okay, example one. What's next in the article? Natural rubber.
Yeah, another strategic resource. Originally sourced from plantations, mainly in the Amazon and Southeast Asia, control over rubber meant colonial power.
And the disruption there.
Synthetic rubber, developed mainly out of necessity during World War II when access to natural rubber supplies was cut off. Petrochemicals were the key.
And after the war, synthetic took over.
It expanded massively. It didn't completely replace natural rubber. We still use both, but it broke the monopoly. Natural rubber lost its unique strategic value, and its price became more tied to oil prices than to how many trees were growing. Global supply chains replaced specific plantations.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
The third parallel the article draws is maybe closer in feel to gold, even if it's not money. Diamonds.
Right. Diamonds carry immense cultural weight, emotional value, financial significance, all built on perceived rarity and the difficulty of mining.
And the tech disruption. Lab-grown diamonds, using processes like HPHT and CVD.
Exactly. And the article highlights the impact on price has been dramatic, a sharp divergence. Lab-grown prices have crashed, down 60–90% in value since 2016, it says.
Yeah, 60 to 90%.
Yeah. Even De Beers, the company that basically built its empire on mined diamond mystique, now sells lab-grown diamonds too, at much lower prices. The market shifted under their feet.
And younger buyers are leaning towards lab-grown.
The article suggests Gen Z often prefers them, yeah. They're more affordable. And there's an ethical angle for some buyers, too, avoiding concerns about conflict diamonds.
What about industrial uses?
Oh, lab-grown completely dominates there. Over 99%, the article states. They're cheaper, and you can tailor their properties precisely for cutting tools, electronics, that sort of thing.
So what's the takeaway for value?
The article points out that investment demand for diamonds has nearly vanished. Resale value is really uncertain. The conclusion it draws is that while diamonds aren't gold, their fate suggests that once scarcity is replicable, long-term value erodes.
Okay, these historical examples really set the stage. Whale oil, rubber, diamonds. Scarcity shattered by tech. So let's dive into the core thought experiment from the daily economy piece. Let's assume the impossible happens. Atom-smashing gold pans out. We can make real stable gold cheaply at scale. What are the consequences?
The article paints a picture of pretty profound disruption, breaking it down into time frames. First, the short term, 0 to 6 months, the immediate reaction. Financial chaos.
Chaos. How specifically?
Gold prices collapse, like almost instantly. The article speculates maybe a 50 to 80% drop almost overnight. Investors would panic, right? Everyone trying to sell their gold before it becomes worthless.
That's a huge shock to the system.
Massive. You'd see frantic ripples everywhere. Maybe a quick temporary jump in other precious metals, silver, platinum, but the article adds a note of caution. They could potentially be made the same way, so that wouldn't last.
What about alternatives?
Cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin with its programmed scarcity, could see a major rally. People looking for a new digital gold, perhaps.
And for countries and central banks holding all that gold.
Big trouble. Gold exporting countries think Ghana, Russia, South Africa, their currencies would plummet. Central banks, huge paper losses, major balance sheet distress. Economies heavily reliant on gold exports face swift and painful current account shocks.
Ouch. Okay, that's the initial explosion. What about the medium term, according to the article? Say 6 months to 2 years out.
The dust settles a bit. The article predicts the gold price would stabilize, but way, way lower, at a new baseline, probably near whatever the cost of artificial production is.
So it fundamentally loses its special status.
Yeah, that historical monetary premium, its shine as an investment, as a hedge, gone. It just becomes stuff.
And the money that was in gold, where does it go?
The article suggests it flows elsewhere, into other assets perceived as stores of value, maybe real estate, maybe fine art, maybe further into those digital assets or cryptocurrencies we mentioned. Capital has to go somewhere.
What happens to the gold miners?
Total collapse, according to the article. Gold mining stocks would become worthless. Investment would flood out of gold extraction and likely into mining other things, maybe lithium, rare earths, materials needed for whatever new tech is dominant. A huge shift in resource focus.
And then the long term,
Yeah.
2 years and beyond. What's the final picture the article paints for gold and for value itself?
In the long run, gold gets reclassified. It's just another industrial commodity. Useful for electronics because it conducts well and doesn't corrode, maybe still for some luxury items, but its role as a ultimate store of value, a monetary anchor, faded into history.
And the central banks adapt.
They'd have to. The article speculates they'd ditch gold reserves or drastically reduce reliance, turning to alternatives. Maybe baskets of currencies, maybe CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, maybe those algorithmically scarce instruments, whatever emerges.
That has massive geopolitical implications.
Great, huge. The article points this out clearly. Countries that hoard gold now, like China or Germany, lose that leverage. But the power shifts
Soon.
to whoever controls the technology for making gold. Mastering synthetic gold production could become a strategic advantage, akin, the article says, to mastering uranium enrichment or dominating semiconductor supply chains. Power through tech, not buried treasure.
So it fundamentally redefines scarcity.
Exactly. That's a core theme in the article. Scarcity stops being about what's naturally rare in the ground. It becomes about code, governance, and confidence. Can you trust the code of cryptocurrency? Can you trust the governance of a digital asset platform? Faith shifts from tangible metal to intangible systems. Our whole perception of value and stability gets permanently altered.
The article also mentions wider ripple effects, sort of across all these timelines.
Yeah, several broad impacts. Any monetary system idea leaning on gold, maybe alternative trade settlements some countries talk about, or gold-backed stablecoins, they lose their foundation.
And just psychologically, gold has been the symbol of wealth and permanence for millennia.
The impact would be enormous. If gold can be manufactured, what else is truly scarce and permanent? It could really shake confidence in tangible assets generally, pushing people faster towards digital alternatives, towards value derived from ideas or algorithms.
What about impacts on specific regions or groups?
The article highlights developing nations heavily reliant on gold exports. They could face devastating fiscal crises, mass unemployment. It even mentions the potential for regime change in politically fragile states if a key revenue source vanishes overnight.
And culturally, places like India.
Yeah, countries where gold is deeply woven into traditions, weddings, dowries, status symbols. Abundant, cheap synthetic gold could democratize access to jewelry, maybe, but it would also fundamentally undermine traditions built around gold's inherent rarity and value. Big cultural shifts.
And all the businesses built around physical gold.
Vaulting companies, secure transport, gold-backed lending. The article suggests they'd face obsolescence or radical transformation. Their whole reason for being changes.
Finally, the article predicts a perhaps inevitable human reaction.
Backlash, conspiracy theories, populist anger. Anytime there's a disruption this fundamental, messing with something as basic as gold, you'd expect accusations of manipulation, distrust of the powers controlling the new tech. It could get messy.
It's quite a picture. So, Wrapping this up, the Daily Economy article makes it clear. Practical, cheap alchemy is not happening anytime soon. The science isn't there yet. The economics are prohibitive.
Right, the current reality is solid ground, or rather, solid gold from the ground.
But the thought experiment, grounded in historical examples like whale oil and diamonds, is powerful. It shows that systems built on natural scarcity can collapse when technology finds a way around it.
And if gold were next, the consequences explored in the article, economic chaos, shifting geopolitical power, a redefinition of value itself are profound. It forces you to think about what value even means.
The article concludes on that note of ambiguity, really. Whether this kind of disruption ultimately brings prosperity or chaos depends on how we handle it. It calls it Schumpeterian creative destruction, painful upheaval, yes, but also immense opportunity.
And understanding these potential shifts, these deep technological undercurrents, is so important for staying informed. It helps you connect the dots between science, economics, politics, precisely the kind of broad, critical thinking that's valuable, whether you're just trying to understand the news or, as we mentioned, preparing for something demanding, like the UPSC exams.
We really hope this deep dive into the daily economy's perspective has given you some food for thought. If you found this useful, if it sparked some ideas, please do give us a like and subscribe so you catch our future deep dives.
And definitely leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your questions or reactions to this whole idea of synthetic gold.
Your input really does help us figure out what to tackle next. And just one last reminder, all the analysis and points discussed today were drawn from that Daily Economy article, Alchemy, Gold, and the Collapse of Scarcity.
Until next time.